Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a program with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. Today's episode, I am going to be reviewing 878 Vikings Invasions of England by Academy Games. Now, just to give you an overall idea of the game, it's basically, well, it's kind of what the title says. This basically covers the Viking invasions of England at this time as the English people try to drive off and basically hold on to their territory against this invasive, if you will, enemy. Basically, the whole point of the game and the critical part of the game is to capture the different city spaces. You can see here on the board, one here, and there's another one over here. Basically, got your victory point chart here, and if the Vikings can capture 14 more spaces at the end of any turn, they automatically win. If the English can get to a point where the Vikings control no of city spaces on the board, they will automatically win the game as well. The game can also end by the treaties that can be enforced during the game, and at the end of any turn, whenever the treaties are enforced, the Vikings can win if they have control 9 spaces or more, or if they have less than that, then the English automatically win. So, just to give you a broad overview here, different categories, just the way I kind of do my reviews and stuff. I'm going to go through different parts of things and discuss them briefly, just to give you, again, just kind of a big picture idea of the game. Playing time. I will say this. You should be prepared to invest some time in this game. This is going to be kind of a long evening game, especially if it goes the whole 7 rounds. I've been playing this one solo because I do a lot of my wargaming solo and stuff in my gaming period, and I've been able to manage about 10 or 15 minutes a turn per faction, depending on battles. Of course, battles can take a while to resolve because battles in this game, as I'll talk about in a little more detail here in a moment, they basically are fight to the finish kind of things. So the game, again, I said, don't last only 7 rounds. It can end at the end of round 5, but it still is going to be a game for a pretty long evening. In the game, there's basically, you have pieces and you have cards with this game. You have minis, which you look here. I've got this massive English army here, and then, of course, the taller ones. There's Alfred the Great and one of the Viking leaders. They represent the leaders with those armies. The leaders also can, depending on if you just stick with the base game, they also can end up as these plastic minis as well too, if you don't want to actually get the, for lack of a better way to articulate, real minis, if you will. And cards are used in the game for different things. You have event cards, and you also have cards that are used to determine movement, how many armies you can move and where. The map covers the part of England that was really involved with all of these Viking invasions at this time. You probably can see here on the map you get different colors, the yellow and the green and the blue. That's actually used with the expansions when you get into the different kingdoms that existed in England at this time. The map comes with the game is good. It's a nice map, but if you really get into it and you're really going to get into buying the extra miniatures and stuff, I think the giant map is well worth the investment. And I have to be honest, I also have been involved with getting the new Hannibal and Hasdrubal game that's coming out, and I wasn't sure about getting the giant map, but now that I've seen this one and it's kind of a similar thing, I'm kind of really excited to get that giant map too. Now, the rules of the game, just to give you a quick rundown, if you really want to know how turns are played and get some more details on it, I do have a couple of videos posted that covers segments of the turn with the Viking faction and also with the English faction. Rules are fairly simple. They're very straightforward, but there are a lot of options in this game. There's a lot of things that you can do here depending on how things fall out. So movement. Movement in this game is determined by cards. You use cards in your hand like this one that indicate the number of armies you may move and how many spaces that you may move them. Now, armies can either be done with leaders, like this individual here, and then you place the armies on the card, like here is one here with Bjorn, Ironside of the Vikings, And over here is Alfred the Great's army on his card. Or they can be like these folks right here. They don't have a leader miniature standing with them. That can be an army as well too. The advantage of the leaders is that when armies have a leader with them, they can move, fight, and continue to move that turn as well if they still have movement points left over. Reinforcements, the English can place them specifically in cities. As shown here, this particular city here, both Housecarl and Thegan reinforcements can be placed. Viking reinforcements are all determined by their reinforcement cards that come into the game at the start of whichever Viking faction takes its turn first. Those ones come in there. Also, the other reinforcements you get come from the folks that end up in the fled circle up here. They're brought back into the game during your reinforcement turns. Battles. Battles, once an army moves into a space, is basically a fight to the finish. And you're going to duke it out until there's only one side in the space. There's never any dual occupation here. That does not exist. The battles are custom dice. Or the dice are custom, I should say, for the battles. And they have different symbols. Moving here from left to right, the green one shows the fled symbol. That's when guys take off and go to that circle I just showed you. The crossed swords. On this particular one, it's a different symbol. On the Viking one is a hit. The blank side is just what it says, it's blank. And then the horn there is the command one, which allows you to move your troops to a neighboring space, provided that you already have friendly troops there. And again, it's a fight to the finish. You keep going until there's only one side standing in a particular spot. Event cards are also part of the game here. And event cards tell you exactly what they are, what they can do. Also on the one side here, you can see that has a nice color bar that tells you exactly when they can be played. So like this one can be played during any faction's activation. However, this card here, the Housecarl Saxon Navy, can only be played whenever the Norsemen or the Berserkers are active. It cannot be played at any other time. So that's kind of an overview. Those of you who are diehard wargamers, you'll notice there's no zones of control here. There's no stacking limits. There's nothing like that. This is, again, a very simple, straightforward kind of war game that we're dealing with here. Now, things I like about the game. I like the turn order. The turn order is variable. If you take a look up here, you can see these cubes representing each of the factions. Those are drawn every single turn. So the turn order is always random. So I like that. That's very cool because no game's ever the same twice. You don't know who's going to get to go. You can take gambles and be like, well, okay, let me try this and let me hope next turn I draw my faction first. I really like that. The fled results. I like the fled results because it fits the time period, and also it adds a layer to the game because where you bring your fled troops back in, that really can make a big difference as far as reinforcement goes. The treaty cards that are in the game. The treaty cards can allow the game to end early, and also you can be forced to play them if they're the only card that's in your hand. When you draw your cards, you get 3 each turn, and you must have at least one type of movement card. The treaty cards are also movement cards, and if that's the only one you have, you're going to have to play it, which then can allow the game to end early because the treaty will be in effect. I like the fact that there's leaders and armies. You can move your armies around, but you can also move them with leaders because, again, it kind of adds to the strategy. It's a very good intro for wargaming and also for youngsters. And part of the reason I bought this, when I kind of did my research about the game, I was thinking long term with my little man because he's still very young. But this will be a great way for, a nice gateway game, if you will, as the expression goes. And expansions. I like the expansions because they can help to balance the game. Some folks have talked about this game being a little bit off here and there in favor of either the Vikings. Some people think the English. But the expansions, you can use some of those things, and you can kind of weight it. So if you're playing with less experienced players, or you think the English don't really have much of a chance, you can go ahead and balance that out. Now, things that can be annoying, having to play that treaty card, because if you're like, dude, I really do not want to do this right now, but then you end up with it on the board, it can end the game before you're ready to, or before you have time to really implement your strategy. It's difficult to retreat, because without the command symbols on the dice, you really can't retreat in this game, and you can end up losing, leader armies as a result, because if you don't get enough die rolls to retreat, then the leaders have to stick around until the last unit on the card is there and able to pull back and follow that command order. The units are a little bit on the small side too. As you can see here with my hand, and my hands are kind of big, and I'm sure I'm not atypical of a lot of wargamers, that can be a little tricky to pick up and manipulate. And the other thing that can be annoying for folks who are more diehard wargamers is that this is a fairly simple game. It's not overly complicated, but that doesn't mean that it's not a good game. It just means that, again, when I say about things that can be annoying, I don't necessarily mean it's annoying for me, but I'm kind of thinking big picture. I'm trying to think of, things that folks might be interested in or be looking at when they evaluate a game. So, in the end here, my overall evaluation of the game, I would give the map an 8. The map is nice and big. It holds stuff well. It's a little hard to read the key at time, but once you get the hang of it and get a hang of the symbols, it's not too bad. Pieces, I would give the pieces a 7, because the pieces are, generally speaking, pretty nice. They're pretty big. They're fairly easy to manipulate, except for the smaller ones, so that's kind of why I give it the 7. The leaders are easy to identify once you get the flags on them here. If you look at Alfred the Great, you can see his symbol. That makes things work out a lot better too. The cards, quite frankly, I give the cards a 9, because the cards, they are real easy to read, understand. They look nice, they sleeve easy, all those good things there. The rules I also give a 9, because they're well organized, they're laid out very well, they give nice explanations and examples, and the event cards are also given in detail in there too. Deployment of forces, I give that an 8. That's pretty quick overall. It takes a little bit if you need to reshuffle, because again, you have to have at least one movement card in your hand, and when you're putting the troops on the Viking leaders cards, that can take a little bit, but that's not too bad. Solo play, I'd give that a 5. It is decent. The turn order, the battle results help in terms of solo play, but the cards can be tricky. Sometimes I use die rolls to determine which movement card I'm going to use, just to add variety to my games. So it's not super solo friendly, but it's not like impossible to play solo either, and that's why I give it a 5. Footprint, I give that a 5 too, because this is a pretty big game. If you look here, you got the map. I've got my English factions over here. I've got my Viking factions here, my dice tower. That's not even counting the treaty board that you can purchase and use with the game too. So the footprint, I'm going to say, is a 5. In the end, though, overall, I give the game a big old 6. And I give it a 6 basically for a couple of very straightforward reasons. There's a lot of variety here. The turn order, the cards that come out, the battle results, having a bunch of people fled, being able to bring those folks back on, that's something that I really like in a game, is that variety. The fun factor. This is just a fun game. It's not trying to be earth-shattering. It's not trying to be a simulation. It is just a fun game, and it is a good intro game. And it's easy also because since each faction has 2 groups on each side, it's a good one to play with new people too, because you can have an experienced wargamer, say, playing the Norsemen, and then an inexperienced one playing the Berserkers, and you can kind of work together as a team, discuss things, and such. So bottom line on this is a good, fun intro war game. It's not a simulation, but it's in the same league, in my opinion, as Memoir 44 and Battlecry. It's good for those who are interested in the time period but don't want a super detailed game. The expansions are nice, can be used to make things harder on one side or the other. I will say that if you like Memoir 44 or Battlecry, you might want to dive in and get all the miniatures and the expansion right off the bat, because you'll really enjoy that. I think it does help enhance the game and the experience. However, I will just say, with a word of caution, for diehard wargamers, may not care for it as much because it may not be meaty enough for them in terms of what they're getting. So, again, my final evaluation is a 6. This is Tim Korchnoi with Bare Bones Wargaming, wishing you victory and fun in all your games.